everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. So today we're finishing up our unit on economic and personal finance. This is the third unit on the government and the economy. Yesterday we talked a lot about North Carolina, specifically the trade, and today we're going to talk more about North Carolina's economy here. A lot to do with trade, what we buy, what we sell, and focus very heavily on the uniqueness that is North Carolina. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, full disclaimer, I was born and raised in North Carolina, so trying to teach it to people that most likely born and raised in North Carolina, and to people that might be watching this that have never even been to North Carolina before, is surprisingly a little more difficult. So I have to kind of, not necessarily dumb it down, but kind of explain it in a very neutral fashion, because if you're like me and you lived here, some of the stuff you didn't know, or you just took it for granted and thought it was everybody's experience. So let's start today talking about agriculture in North Carolina. So North Carolina produces a bunch of stuff, all right, and we grow a bunch of stuff that we sell around the world. All right. Obviously, we consume a lot of it here and we use it, but it also gets shipped out around the world. Now, this was surprising to me. North Carolina is number one in the production of the growth and production of sweet potatoes. I did not know that North Carolina was the leader in sweet potato production in the entire country. I've lived here my entire life, and I've eaten sweet potatoes all the time. Maybe sweet potatoes aren't as readily available in all the other states. This struck me as odd because in the last 20 years, just now they have sweet potato french fries in restaurants, and they're like, oh, it's like this gourmet thing. Oh, you have regular potato french fries and then sweet potato french fries. Then I come to find out we literally produce 50% of the country's sweet potatoes. Like, why have we not always had sweet potato fries? Sweet potatoes are like one of the, by comparison to anybody else, half the country's sweet potatoes come from America. Come from North Carolina. Now, if you do happen to be like me and you grew up in North Carolina, you've seen that this to me, if you're like, hey, show North Carolina in a picture, this is it. All right. So depending on where you are, and if you've grown up anywhere in the country or rural, you've seen this. This is tobacco. All right. So, again, growing up here, you've seen it. It grows in fields. They harvest it, and then they hang it in like barns back here. Like, why don't they just tear that barn down? That barn is actually used to let the tobacco, once it comes out of the ground, they let it dry, basically like die. And it keeps, tobacco has nicotine properties is what causes it to be a big seller. That stays in it, but it dries, and it just hangs in this barn and lets it heat in that barn for a long time before it's sold. So those barns that you always see at tobacco crops are always really necessary. Now, North Carolina is one of the leading producers of tobacco, not only in America, but in the world. And why? All right. Now, the climate has a lot to do with it. The hot, humid summers is very, very important for growing tobacco. Another thing that makes tobacco grow very well in North Carolina is the soil. So if you've grown up in North Carolina like I have, and you're a kid outside playing and you got muddy and you came in, your clothes are ruined. Not only did you have like dirt on your clothes, it's this red clay soil you just cannot get out of your clothes. Well, that red clay soil, as I learned when I got older, isn't most places have brown dirt. In North Carolina, we commonly have this red clay soil, and that red clay soil is really, really good for tobacco. There's actually multiple types of soil in North Carolina that helps different types of crops grow very well. All the soils, including the red clay soil, they are very good at keeping the nutrients in, and especially the level of acidity that is in it. does a really good job of giving the tobacco a unique property that is highly sought after. So because of the climate and the soil, which is really found almost nowhere else on earth, the tobacco grown in North Carolina is one of the most highly preferred types of tobacco on earth. And that's why a lot of tobacco companies made tons of money back in tobacco's heyday in the 20th century by being able to trade and sell tobacco all over the world. So tobacco, if you're growing up in North Carolina, you've probably seen tobacco. Another one, and this surprised me, all right? Did not know that North Carolina was one of the top producers of turkeys. Turkeys. 9 counties in 2018, which is the 1 year I grabbed, had over 1 million turkeys. That obviously Thanksgiving's pretty big. Like if you grow roses, Valentine's Day is pretty big. If you grow turkeys and you farm turkeys, Thanksgiving's probably a pretty big deal for you. But 9 counties had over 1 million turkeys in it. And again, there's something like, so turkeys, there's never been a shortage of turkeys. I've actually never seen, I am in 2023, here when this is being recorded, I am getting ready to turn 40 years old. I have never seen a turkey farm. Never have. Now granted, I've never spent a lot of time in any of these counties, but even though I've been around all of them as I'm looking at them here. Anywho, but turkeys, huge exporter or growth in North Carolina. Here's another one. I completely took this for granted. When I was doing research on this stood out to me. I want to add it in here. North Carolina is the #2 producer of Christmas trees in the country. The #1 producer is Oregon, which is literally on the other side of the country. So it's not like North Carolina gets a lot of competition from Oregon because you cut down the Christmas trees and they don't last super long because you're cutting them down. So you wouldn't ship them to the other side of the country. So like North Carolina owns the East Coast, Oregon owns the West Coast. When you drive up to the mountains, and we'll talk about the different geography in North Carolina, there's so many like Christmas tree farms. I just thought that's what it was like everywhere. Apparently, I'm an idiot. So North Carolina is a mass producer of Christmas trees. So while like me and my family go up to Boone in the mountains here in North Carolina and make a whole day trip of it. We go find our tree, we cut it down. We have to pay them obviously, and it ain't cheap. But you find the tree you want, you get it cut down, you bring it back home. I just thought every state had that. Apparently not. So people in like New York and Connecticut and probably down in Florida that want the good Christmas trees that grow in North Carolina in the mountainous regions, they would, these farms a lot of times would just clear cut huge sections and take big truckloads down or up to these different states. So most people apparently don't have the experience that I do unless you are, travel all the way to North Carolina, which would seem to be a lot. But the question here is, how does the red clay soil in North Carolina lead to tobacco being the largest crop produced in the state? So while, yes, 50% of all the sweet potatoes in the state are produced, we grow a lot more tobacco than we do sweet potatoes. So just tell me about the connection between the red clay soil and how that helps tobacco in North Carolina. So pause me, answer that completely. We're moving on. All right. So another thing that brings in a lot of money in the North Carolina economy that we trade to other states and other countries is manufacturing. Basically, we make things in North Carolina. This is huge in North Carolina. All right. So manufacturing is kind of a catch-all across the board. And these little dots are the different places that manufacture stuff like vaccines, gene therapy, a lot of sciencey stuff. That is absolutely part of pharmaceuticals. That's absolutely part of manufacturing. A lot of the classic manufacturing, and I don't want to discount that because we make a ton of money off the research and the technology now in North Carolina. North Carolina's always been known for manufacturing. one of the things that North Carolina is most known for, right, in the manufacturing area, if we narrow it down a little bit, is textiles. Now, I really wish I could simplify what is textiles for you. So, I mean, I can. Is when you're making things out of like cloth and thread and cotton, because the South is still a large producer of cotton. North Carolina is still the largest cash crop in North Carolina outside of tobacco is still cotton. There's a big gap between the two, but it's still cotton. So textiles are taking like cotton, and here's an actual picture of like North Carolina organic grown cotton and making it into a shirt. That would be a textile. So, but it would be oversimplified to say, hey, North Carolina makes t-shirts, right? Because in textiles, it is a wide variety of things. If you can make fabric and make stuff out of fabric, there's all types of stuff that you can make out of it. And I want to give you some like obscure examples that you're probably not thinking about. Fire hoses, all right? The machine here on the top left, that is a machine that makes the canvas for fire hoses, which is like incredibly strong. North Carolina is creating the textile. So like the cloth that is used for fire hoses. Now, North Carolina also probably has manufacturing for fire hoses, but you got to have somebody that can make that cloth that makes a fire hose. And North Carolina does that on top of just a plethora of other things. Down here at the bottom, you can see that we're #1 for textile mill facilities. We have like more than one per day. Not that those two things correlate, but over 365 textile mills. And so some of the stuff that we make, like upholstery, like in your car, like the seat material, the floorboards, like the cloth that's on the ceiling, that's all textiles. That's what North Carolina just mass produces, all right? So it's like cloth, but there's so many different versions of it. It's collectively referred to generally as textiles. Not surprisingly, because we make like cloth and upholstery and stuff like that, North Carolina is a leader in the world, really, at furniture manufacturing, all right? So the amount of furniture plants in and around North Carolina is huge, especially like right where I'm at in the center of the state. There is an actually furniture plant that is in the county I'm in right now that employs a ton of people, even in modern day. So, and we'll talk, anyway, and jumping into different subjects here of how many rabbit holes I want to go down, talk about NAFTA and North American Free Trade Agreement and stuff. Sticking with North Carolina. So even though the furniture industry has taken a hit with the reduction of tariffs from other countries, which is what North American Free Trade Agreement was, and it hurt North Carolina jobs, there is still a massive amount of furniture manufacturing in North Carolina. And the big reason is we already have the textiles here. So you already have the upholstery. Why would you go to Oklahoma and build a furniture factory where they're like putting the frames and stuff together for furniture, and then you just have to buy and ship all the textiles from North Carolina over there? So that is why the furniture industry is huge in North Carolina. In High Point every year they have the High Point Furniture Show, and people come from all over the world to come see different types of furniture. It's usually like huge corporations that are coming in and looking at super rich elite corporations that are looking for high-end furniture for like offices and stuff like that. Not like school desk or anything, but like high-end furniture that'll be used at an executive level. And it's a big part of North Carolina's economy is furniture creation, which is connected to the textile industry. And then two things, if you grew up in North Carolina, all right, you probably didn't know or from North Carolina. Actually, one of these is. Cheerwine is made in North Carolina. North and South Carolina work together on Cheerwine. Don't want to throw shade at South Carolina here. But Cheerwine is a North Carolina-based company. Now, if you are watching this, if you've never been to North Carolina, you might not be familiar with Cheerwine. If you grew up in North Carolina, it might blow your mind that some people aren't familiar with Cheerwine. But I think I all knew that Cheerwine was a local soda that was really just used around here. Texas Pete, however. Texas Pete is not made in Texas. If you grew up in North Carolina, I might be blowing your mind right now. Texas Pete is a North Carolina hot sauce made in North Carolina. You're like, what? That's crazy. If you're not from North Carolina, you may never have heard of Texas Pete. Texas Pete is the Tabasco sauce in North Carolina. It is in every restaurant that has hot sauce, it is Texas Pete. That is the staple in North Carolina. And because it has Texas in the name of it, people probably just assume it's from Texas around here. And it's not. It is a North Carolina-based company. But the question here is, what is the major impact of furniture manufacturing on North Carolina's economy? So just kind of walk me through and talk about basically why the furniture manufacturing is really done in North Carolina, and is it big or small? It kind of just talk to me about the importance of that to North Carolina. So pause me, answer that completely. We're moving on. All right, tourism. I had mentioned in the last lesson about cultural diversity. When you trade with a bunch of countries, it leads to tourism. And then I jumped off that saying tourism is really, really good for different countries, people to come visit, because when you go on vacation, you spend a lot of money. All right, so that's a lot of taxes, a lot of stuff that's being paid for by people that are new to the area. So because of that, all right, that tourists spend a lot of money. Tourism is a huge part of a lot of economies. North Carolina is no different. There are a ton of places in North Carolina that are very touristy, that people come from all over to see. Even people inside North Carolina travel to other places for these. So, because I've grown up in North Carolina and I've been to all these places and it's like a pivotal part of my existence, I'm hoping I'm hitting the high points here. And anyway, so you let me know if I'm missing something here. I'm sure I am, because there's so much more that I couldn't add in here. All right, so here's some of the stuff. So North Carolina is very unique in that we have multiple sections of our state with completely different geographies. So let's start in the mountains, all right, in the western part of North Carolina. That is the Blue Ridge Parkway there on the left, in which it is a scenic highway built through messed up mountain. This picture here is clearly taken during falls. As far as you can see, mountain ranges in the Blue Ridge Parkway is absolutely beautiful. The top right, that is the Biltmore House. That is Vanderbilt, who was the tycoon of railroads. It's his grandson built that house. It is the largest single family home in America. You can travel it, but it is, about feels like you're having to buy a house in order just to walk. It feels like $100 to walk, but it is. I just went a couple years ago. Me and my wife went at Christmas, and it's beautiful, a big Christmas thing. And you're like, oh man, this is awesome. It's really cool. And then after room 73, you're like, this is just ridiculous. And they're like, oh, here's this thing that hangs on the wall. It's $5 million. Got it from, and it's so much excess. You even show up to expect to be wowed up in Asheville. And they own a mountain range. Pisgah National Forest today used to be their backyard, and they gave it away. Anyway, bottom left, that is Grandfather Mountain. Is a mile-high bridge that you can walk across. If you're scared of heights, don't attempt it. I'm not scared of heights, but if you go with somebody that's afraid of heights, don't try to make them walk across that thing, because it is absolutely terrifying. And then there's a theme park up in the mountains of North Carolina called Tweetsie Railroad, which is super cool. It's a fully functioning train. I just have a picture here of the train, but they have some rides and stuff, and it's a really cool thing. Cowboys and Indians fight, which has gotten political correctness. You're starting to realize maybe they should change it. They've changed it up some here recently to get with the times and realize maybe the way we did it in the 1970s is no longer appropriate. But it's really cool. It's a really kid-centered amusement park in the mountains. But I went with my kids again a couple years ago, and I went in the 1980s when I was a kid, and it blew my mind. I went back, and I tell you what, this is extremely well done. It looks just like it did when I went there. It's very well upkept. It's anyway. So that's tourism in the mountains. Let's go to the Piedmont. So the top left, it's called Old Salem. So there's a city called Winston-Salem, and originally it was a town called Salem back in colonial times, and built around another town called Winston, and they merged together and they became Winston-Salem. The original town of Salem has been completely preserved in like the heart of Winston, and it's really, really cool. Because you can go visit it. Stories, there's people that like work there full time, like kind of they play dress up, they make them Moravian cookies, and talk a lot about the life at the time. And as you get older, you're like, oh my gosh, like how when you start talking about stuff that was built in the 1700s, like slave labor and stuff like that, but. Old Salem very effectively doesn't have that they've uncovered yet a whole lot of skeletons in the closet. Pretty normal town. Not slavery did exist there, but there's been a lot of research on it. There's so it's just very well kept and is right in the center of Winston-Salem. Top right, that is Pilot Mountain, which you would think shouldn't that be in the mountains? It's actually just a random mountain in the Piedmont. Bottom left, that is Lake Norman. It is an absolutely enormous lake, and a lot of people go out there and like party and go on boats, and I don't know if fishing's allowed on Lake Norman, honestly, off the top of my head. And then the bottom right, that is the Barbecue Festival, which is in Lexington, North Carolina, and over like 100,000 people show up on like one Saturday to like just envelop this small town of Lexington by barbecue and it's like a fair. It's just a fair in the middle of the small town, but like over 100,000 people show up because like Lexington style barbecue, that is from Lexington, North Carolina. And I'm not even getting into what's the best type of barbecue because people in North Carolina will fight you on that, as well as other states like Kansas City. It's like, just have your opinion and stick to it. All right, so then you go to the coast. Because North Carolina, we have the mountains on one side, we have the coast on the other. You got beautiful beaches, tons of like beachfront property there. You have the lighthouses for the historical aspect. There's also museums and stuff there. Bottom left, that's the Outer Banks, which you can go. And all these beaches, there's really no private beaches. You go to the beach to go play in the water and hang out on the beaches. It's not like a super exclusive thing. You may have to rent a place there or that has access to it. But the beaches in North Carolina are absolutely for beach use. Outer Banks are very famous for being able to fish and go swimming and all that as well. There's also wild horses that still live on the Outer Banks. And then Southport, which is a city in North Carolina, is known for they have a massive 4th of July holiday out there at the coast as well. If that doesn't suit your fancy, the sports in North Carolina are pretty exceptional. The Carolina Hurricanes, which is a very good hockey team that a lot of people doesn't get its due here. You have the Carolina Panthers, which is in Charlotte, North Carolina, but they're technically shared tax money-wise with South Carolina. You have the Charlotte Hornets, the basketball team. But if you talk about basketball, North Carolina, Duke versus Carolina, the two college rivalries it's an immense rivalry. You basically have to pick a side one way or other. I went to East Carolina University, and both of these teams are better than my team of East Carolina, so have at it. But people will viciously have an opinion on Duke versus Carolina, and their basketball games, which they play at least twice every year, are must-watch TV, and a lot of people will travel to North Carolina for the exceptional, not only sports that we have, but the concerts that are held in these venues as well. So the question here is, what attracts people to North Carolina for tourism purposes? So pause me, answer that completely. We're moving on. All right. So technology industries in North Carolina. The main thing you need to know about North Carolina when it comes to technology, and we kind of talked about a little bit of the biomedical earlier, is something called the Research Triangle, sometimes just called the Triangle in North Carolina. If you're not from here, you're like, what is the Triangle? Or if you do live here and you hear about the Triangle all the time, and you're like, I don't know what that exactly is, and now it's kind of weird to ask. So the Triangle in North Carolina is short for the Research Triangle Park. And it's kind of a geographic area right in the center of the state. Right? And the reason it's called the Research Triangle is it's right between 3 Tier 1 research universities. All right? So Tier 1 means super elite in doing research and cutting edge technology. And those three universities are Duke and Carolina that we just talked about. They're very intense on basketball. They're very close to each other if you're not from North Carolina and have only heard about that rivalry. So Duke and UNC are actually very close. University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, UNC. They're very close. And then NC State, which is, they're all in like the same, vicinity. The triangle that connects those is called the Research Triangle Park, and there is more doctors per capita in that triangle than anywhere else on Earth. So it is a huge part of technology development, and not only technology development, but research development and technology. You have these universities that are willing to work together and and really focus on using their facilities for learning and teaching. Not only that, people got to graduate from college at some point. They all have these doctorates, and then these Research Triangle companies will hire those people directly from these universities because they've probably already worked together during college. And it's kind of a two-way street here on the very intelligent, focused research people that work in these companies and the colleges, because they all work together on that. So the question here is, how do the many universities and the technology industries in North Carolina rely on each other? So pause me, answer that completely. We're moving on. All right, so this is the diverse experiences in North Carolina. When I'm here talking about diverse experience, not so much talking about the diversity of culture, which absolutely exists in North Carolina, so much so that we don't have a clear political party. We're a swing state. Half the state is usually pretty staunch Democrat. The other half is staunch Republican. Actually, most are independent. So North Carolina is a swing state as well. So there is a diverse culture and politics here. But North Carolina's diverse is the things that you can experience, is the regions, all right? So not only, let me go back to this first. North Carolina's central location on the East Coast, all right, makes it a very central hub for trade, because this is a good central location to trade for the states up north and the states down south. So that part of our geography, it really plays our advantage in trade, is because we're kind of in the center of everything on the East Coast. The regions themselves help us a whole lot, not only with tourism, right? Because people want to go to the mountains, they want to go to the beach, so they want to see these sporting events. Not only does it really help with tourism, it also really helps give a plethora of different experiences. As far as the types of crops that you can grow, whether it's Christmas trees. Christmas trees aren't going to grow at the beach, all right? Tobacco is not going to grow very well up in the mountains. So the different regions really provide a diverse economy that works together to really benefit North Carolina. All right, so the question here is, how does North Carolina's location help its economy? So answer that completely. Pause me if you need to. And that's the end of this unit. See you guys next unit.